could actually have runaway inflation. People have talked about this. Are these doomsday sayers? Are they just crazy saying this? I don't think that's any longer a question. I think there is really a legitimate question whether or not we are on the brink of something that could be disastrous. You know, people have flocked to the dollar. The dollar's been stable. So of all these paper currencies that have no backing, the dollar's always been the best. We've been able to export our inflation because we import more than we export. And so as we buy things from overseas, we pay them in dollars. And we've been exporting inflation for 40 years. The question is, now we've printed up so much money to pay for this bailout, for the stimulus package that's either borrowed or going to be new money into circulation. What happens when the rest of the world finally loses confidence in even the dollar? You know, the dollar had a little uptick in the fall, which some people didn't predict as the stock market went down. People fled other currencies because the dollar was the best of the bad. But what happens when the dollar is even no longer trusted? It is about confidence. There's a woman who wrote several textbooks with Milton Friedman. Her name is Anna Schwartz. And if you Google this article, I think it's one of the best articles in the last 3 months. Thank you.
Thank you. You talked for a while.
It's about, she's about 95 years old now. She wrote all these textbooks. She's not as famous as Milton Friedman, but I think she is the other half of that team. She's about 95 years old. She goes to the office every day in Manhattan. She has like some kind of think tank she's associated with. But anyway, the Wall Street Journal caught up with her and said, "What about this liquidity crisis?" And she said, "Well, Bernanke's got it all wrong. He's fighting the last war. He read my textbook, but he's still stuck in the Depression." In the Depression, there truly was a liquidity crisis because people panicked, took their money out of banks, and they stuck it under their mattress. Well, people didn't do it by and large that way this time. They panicked and they took their money, but they put it all in treasury bills or money markets. So you have a stack of trillions of dollars, they call it sitting on the sidelines. So she says, well, is that lack of liquidity? Not really. She says that's a lack of confidence in the asset sheets of what people were investing in. So no one has confidence. You know, anybody want to buy some AIG stock? You know? Oh, that's right. You already own AIG stock. We own 80% of AIG now. I think that's something that will be interesting if I could get, if Bunning should leave the race and I should go forward and run for Bunning's seat, if we could get to a general election, what would be really interesting is that both the Republicans and the Democrats deserve a lot of criticism over this. But I haven't yet to have one patient come into my office or one meeting that I've spoken to where I've had one person come up to me and say the bailout was a good idea. That money could have been burned in a furnace for all of the good it's done. We've given AIG $130 billion, and they're still essentially bankrupt. Their stock was worth 42 cents. I don't know if it's gone up any, but it's essentially a worthless company. And there was another way out. The way out is the traditional way out we've had, and it's a legalized form of bankruptcy. And you go through bankruptcy court. AIG was a big, huge company, but maybe 70% of AIG was good. It was an insurance company. It still has a lot of good assets, but it's being drugged down by the 30% or so that got involved in the mortgage securities and the credit default swaps and the derivatives. You could have gone through a liquidation. We did it with Fruit of the Loom in Bowling Green. They went through bankruptcy court. I lost some money in the stock. Fortunately, I didn't have very much stock, but I lost my stock. So did everybody else. But out of it came a leaner, meaner company that then was bought by Warren Buffett. Same could have happened to AIG, and it's the way capitalism works. You don't always lose companies, even General Motors. We'd hate to see General Motors go bankrupt, but it would be a change of ownership is what would happen. All the contracts would be renegotiated. You'd have a change of ownership. You'd have new people owning GM. To give you an example of why it's bad to give money to companies that are failing, GM sells a lot of cars. They sold over 9 million cars last year. Toyota sold over 9 million cars. Toyota made $18 billion and GM lost, I don't know, $20, $30 billion last year. Their model hasn't changed significantly, and they can't get out from under it unless they had a massive restructuring. They can't tinker around the edges. They have one worker for every 5 retirees. Their wages for their laborers are twice what Toyota pays. They can never come out of this. So any money you give to them is bad. What will politicians say? Well, the poor homeowner that's overextended, we have to help them. Well, I've met really anybody in my office as the patients come through or any of these meetings who says that they want help. 92% of us, 93% of us are paying our mortgage. Why should we pay for those who bought a much bigger house than us and then borrowed against their house to build a swimming pool? We didn't do that. We have a smaller house and we live within our means. The other thing is that sometimes compassion is misguided. Let's say someone has a $100,000 house and its mortgage for $120,000. They will never get out from under that. It is an unwinnable situation. and most politicians won't say this, but they need to be a renter. What happens if they become a renter? It's very hard on that individual family, but the price of houses will drop. Some young and upcoming person will now get a house for $80,000, and we go on. But you have to move through the tough love, the suffering, and you have to allow that to happen to move forward. But we've now told, and Obama has said, we will allow no banks to fail, and we're not going to allow homeowners to fail. And a lot of them are hard luck cases, but you have to go through things. The faster and quicker you go through liquidation of bad debt, which is a fancy term, but it's just suffering, the faster you go through it, the faster capitalism can pull you forward and go on. And we have to allow that to happen, and we're not allowing that to happen. Within the Republican primary, I've been talking a little bit about the U.S. Senate race for Jim Bunning's seat. He still says he's running. The second question, though, that most reporters ask him is, Jim or Senator Bunning, are you really running? Because there have been a lot of things going on that make us think that maybe he's not going to run. There are prominent Republicans in the state who tell me then that even though he's saying he's going to run, it might be in 6 months that he discovers he's not raising money or having more trouble on the campaign trail, that he all of a sudden decides that he's not going to run. So I've begun traveling around the state and giving speeches with a hope of setting the nucleus for should a time come that he doesn't. And it might not happen, so we're not raising any money or forming any committees. We want to get out, meet people, have you tell friends, have them look at websites and try to spread the word on this. And I think it would be a lot of fun and very winnable race. I think the race now in Kentucky, the way the primaries work, is you don't have to have, I think you used to have 40%. I think the rule has changed now that you only have to have a majority of the votes. So if Bunning shouldn't retire, there'll probably be 4 or 5 candidates. It could be a race that's won with 25 to 30% of the vote. And that's very doable for people like us who I think are the committed, who believe in things, who will get out and work and do things. I think we could win it. I think there are a lot like us across the country now that we have access to through the internet. On the way up here, I stopped over at the Teal speaker manufacturing company, and we were seeing on the internet 2 young men from California, 25 years old, that are really into the computer. They've already set up a website for me, not connected with me at all, but they've set up a website for me to run. There are all kinds of people out there that can do things and are willing to do things for the kind of things that we believe in. But some of it's just the providence of the moment, whether or not something happens. I don't think it's worth my time, your time, or your money to run against Bunning. There are some good things about what Bunning has done. Opposing the bank bailout has been very good. I think it's been his finest moment in the U.S. Senate, opposing the bank bailout. So I have no desire or will I run against Bunning, but I want to be prepared should he not run. The party has to have direction, and we have to decide which direction it goes. So I don't have any problem with, for example, part of the wing of the party has been floating David Williams to run. He's the president of the Senate. David Williams has just recently done something that I think is very wrong for Republicans to do. He's gone along with the Democrats in raising taxes. We raised the cigarette and alcohol tax, and now we're going to allow the gas tax to go up as well. He basically accepts their argument that there's a shortfall. But the truth of the matter is in the numbers, and you have to look at the numbers, and government at all levels plays these tricks. They always talk about the budget, but it's the proposed budget. So if you ask someone, and you look at the government statistics that are coming out of Frankfurt, do we have more money this year than last year? Yes. The last time I looked at the statistics was 2 months ago, and we had 2% more than last year. So we're still bringing in more than last year, but then why do we have a shortfall? Well, they wanted a 4% gain. So this year's budget projects a 4% gain, so because we're 2% behind 4%, we have a shortfall. But it's a shortfall on projected budget, on projected income. It's like saying I make $100,000 this year and I want to make $120,000, and I'm making $110,000. Oh, I have a $10,000 shortfall. Well, none of us would see it that way. We'd say I'm making $10,000 more than last year. But they don't report their statistics that way. But David Williams went along with it, allowed the taxes to be raised. I think that's the wrong way to go about it. Even had there been a shortfall in the Kentucky budget and we accepted their numbers, the Republican argument, the traditional Republican argument that I believe in is you cut spending. We don't raise taxes for budget shortfall. We all think government is too big and government should be smaller. You rein in spending and you cut spending. You find waste and projects that shouldn't be funded at the state level and you cut them.